Eridu, a megacity older than the first known civilization and older than the pyramids of Giza, was buried in the sands of the Mesopotamian desert for over 2,000 years. Now, scientists have made a discovery that changes what we know about the ancient city. They found over 4,000 canals around Eridu that brought water to more than 700 farms where people worked between the 6th and the early 1st millennium BCE. Now, Eridu was founded around 5400 BCE and was the city of the first kings and history's first city according to the Sumerian king list, an ancient text on a clay tablet. Ancient Sumerians believed that deities created this city when they decided to settle on Earth. Eridu plays such a big role in Sumerian myths and legends that, at some point, people used to think it was just a mythical location. The most famous Eridu myth says that the skies got angry because humans were too noisy, so they decided to send a great flood to wipe them out. A new study showed that the Euphrates River served as the source of water for the entire city. The researchers mapped what remains of the ancient landscape and found a well-developed network of artificial irrigation canals. They discovered 200 large main canals pulling water from the Euphrates, and those canals fed another 4,000 smaller canals. The team used everything from satellite images and drone footage to soil analysis, old records, and remote sizing tech to map out the area. The 700 farms that used the water from the system were different in size, from about 5,000 square feet to over 200,000 square feet. The main canals were a little over a half-mile long, and some stretched more than 5 miles. The smaller canals could be as short as 32 feet. Rivers in Mesopotamia were the main water sources for farming, so ancient farmers had to learn how to guide water from the river to their fields. It all started with simple methods, like digging small canals, but over generations, they learned how to build massive canals up to 62 miles long. The Euphrates itself helped the farmers. Water was moving thanks to gravity down its elevated riverbanks, and natural breaks in the banks let it spill onto the land. Researchers aren't sure when each canal was in use, and it's unlikely that all 4,200 canals were active at the same time during that long period. Now, Eridu used to be an important religious and trade center because of its strategic location on the Persian Gulf. Its economy mostly had to do with fishing, thanks to the Euphrates River. Researchers found fishing nets and weights and whole bales of dried fish at the site. And there were even models of reed boats, the earliest physical evidence we have for constructed boats anywhere. The city was thriving until people abandoned it around the year 600 BCE, and scientists still aren't sure why they did it. The local residents, plus the visiting pilgrims and merchants, had just exhausted all the resources of the land. They had to let it rest several times before abandoning the city for good. It happened when the Euphrates changed its course, and they lost their main source of water. Now, many centuries later, in 1854, a British official was on a mission to this area to check out a remote place that had a bunch of mounds called tells, which are piles of debris left behind by ancient human settlements. At first, Taylor wasn't impressed. He had been hoping to find something big, maybe statues, ancient writing, or ruins of palaces and temples. But with the brief time he had, all he found were things like walls, drains, stone platforms, and pieces of limestone columns decorated with tiny mosaic cones. But he didn't know that these boring mounds were hiding one of the oldest cities on Earth, Eridu. The people at the British Museum got interested in the finding, but the first full-scale excavations took place here only around a century later. The local Iraqi authorities got really interested in the excavations as they were hoping to find more about the earliest days of Mesopotamian history. So they focused on Mound 1, a massive tell as tall as an 8-story building. Soon they uncovered part of an unfinished step pyramid from the end of the 3rd millennium BCE. As they dug deeper, they found layers of human life going back in time. There were levels from the Uruk period, and even remains from a time before the Sumerians called proto-history. In those lower layers, they discovered multiple rebuilds of the Temple of Enki, the city's main deity. People rebuilt this temple again and again for over 2,000 years. Every time the temple collapsed, they built a new one right on top. Each new version of the temple was bigger and more impressive than the last. From the middle of the 4th millennium BCE, these temple buildings became massive, more advanced than anything else humans had built up to that point. The city in Eridu was also becoming more complex, with clear social classes. Eventually, they stopped rebuilding the temple and put up a step pyramid on top of the ruins. Even though Eridu faded, it likely stayed important as a religious site. Archaeologists found pottery from the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE during excavations, although there were no signs of houses. The Sumerians were an innovative civilization, as you can tell. By 1500 BCE, they invented the cedar plow, a tool that let farmers plow and plant seeds at the same time, using animals like oxen to pull it. This gear even came with instructions. The Sumerian Farmer's Almanac gave farmers advice on how to grow more crops with proper tilling and irrigation. These smart farming tricks helped feed more people, which led to larger cities, an organized ruling system, and more focus on religion. And as their cities expanded, so did their work in writing, math, and spiritual life. 5,000 years ago, the Sumerians had already produced cuneiform, one of the first writing systems in history. So another recent find from the same part of the world proves that bureaucracy existed already 4,000 years ago. Archaeologists found ancient administrative tablets in another ancient Sumerian city. These clay tablets are the oldest solid proof we have of the world's first empire, the Akkadian Empire. The tablets were inside a state archive building made of mud bricks, which had different rooms that acted like offices. Now, before this discovery, archaeologists didn't really understand how the first known empire in the world, the Akkadian Empire, worked behind the scenes. But now, thanks to the recent Gerso excavations, we have the first real and unambiguous evidence of the empire's administrative system. They tracked everything – deliveries, spending, and inventory, from fish to sheep to grains, fabric, and even gems. The tablets also include population records, with names and jobs of men, women, and kids, an ancient version of a census. From these records, scientists found out that women played a key role in Akkadian society. Some women had powerful positions, like high priestesses. The tablets also show a wide range of jobs, from skilled workers like stonecutters to people with simpler roles like temple floor sweepers. Some even included building blueprints, field layouts, and canal maps, proving that the empire had serious organization and planning. Eventually, the city rebelled and gained its independence, and the Akkadian Empire's 150-year rule ended. Now, researchers are carefully cleaning and translating the tablets to fully understand what they say. These new finds will replace older, incomplete ideas about the empire and give us a way more accurate picture of how Akkadian power and the ruling system actually worked.
One of the greatest mysteries in human history is probably the origins of the Great Pyramid of Giza. This massive, awe-inspiring structure has been puzzling pretty much everyone for thousands of years. How did ancient engineers, without modern tools or machines, manage to pull off something so jaw-droppingly monumental? Could it be that they had a bit of extraterrestrial help? We'll dwell on this theory a bit later, but first, how about one of the more tradiatonal explanations? It claims that ancient workers could have built massive ramps to haul giant stones up to the pyramid's higher levels. It sounds reasonable until you find out that there's barely any archaeological evidence for these ramps. Sure, smaller ramps might have been used, but huge, miles-long ramps? Not likely. And even if they had existed, they would have been an enormous feat in themselves, since the builders would have needed almost as much material for the ramp as for the pyramid itself. This is where things get interesting. Since the ramp theory doesn't fully hold up, we're left with an even bigger mystery. How did the Egyptians move millions of multi-ton stones with such precision? Well, some people point to extraterrestrial visitors. The idea that aliens might have been behind the construction of the pyramids has existed for decades. According to this theory, the pyramids were just too advanced for humans to have built on their own. The precision of the architecture, the sheer scale of the project, and the mysterious mathematical principles at play have made many people believe that some outside force must have lent a hand. One of the biggest arguments the supporters of this theory have is that building something as perfect as the Great Pyramid would have required a bird's eye view. And who could have had that view? Certainly not humans, but maybe a spaceship. Aliens could have hovered above, guiding the construction. If you thought things couldn't get any more mysterious, let's talk about the golden ratio. A mathematical principle you can meet everywhere in nature, from seashells to galaxies. And the Great Pyramid's proportions seem to align almost perfectly with the golden ratio. Alien theorists point to this as evidence that the Egyptians couldn't have pulled this off without some extraterrestrial help. Some people even went so far as to claim that alien remains had been found inside the Great Pyramid. But before you get too excited, keep in mind that there's no solid evidence to back this up. And still, let's take a closer look inside the Great Pyramid. If the exterior is impressive, the interior is downright mind-blowing. It's a labyrinth of tunnels, shafts, and chambers so complex that it's no wonder people have speculated about alien involvement. How could ancient humans have designed something so intricate and mysterious? Some believers say this is further proof that the pyramids were more than just tombs. They were either built or influenced by some kind of divine or extraterrestrial intelligence. And now, let's get into one of the wildest ideas. What if the pyramids were built to align with the stars or even act as part of an ancient space elevator? Some theorists suggest that the pyramids were aligned with certain constellations and served as landing sites for alien spacecraft. Come to think about it, the site indeed sounds like a cosmic airport. All those sharp angles, the perfect geometry, the precise alignment with the stars. Others go even further, proposing that the pyramids were part of a long-lost spacefaring technology. They could have been used to harness energy from stars or served as gateways between worlds. So, are the pyramids really ancient alien landing sites? Were they part of a cosmic energy grid? So far, there's no scientific proof to support these ideas. The Great Pyramid, with all its secrets and unanswered questions, continues to captivate everyone's attention. It's a reminder that there are still things in this world, and maybe beyond it, that we just don't fully understand.
What if we're not the only technological species on Earth? No, don't side-eye the person next to you. I'm pretty sure they're human. I'm talking about a whole advanced society that might have lived millions of years before us and then vanished. Yeah, it's a bold theory, but it's possible. Which brings up a big question. If they really existed, would we even be able to tell? Because, let's be honest, we are fascinated by the idea of finding intelligent life on other planets. So much so, we almost ignore the possibility that an advanced civilization might have existed right here on Earth. Long before humans evolved. Before dinosaurs even. And there might be hidden clues pointing to them. But where? That's exactly what the Silurian hypothesis tries to figure out. The name Silurian comes from an advanced extraterrestrial race on the TV show, Doctor Who. But the real-world idea is a little different. Scientists aren't really asking whether a pre-human civilization existed or not. They're asking something trickier. If they did exist, would we have any way of knowing? In other words, do we even have the necessary tools to find out? You see, it is possible they did exist. Take the human race, for example. We started building industries and using machines back in the 18th century. Our technology has come a long way since then, and it's grown to the point that, well, it's giving us a bit of trouble right now. All that progress is starting to impact the planet's climate and ecosystems. And if things keep going that way, one day, humanity could disappear. Sure, it's an apocalyptic, hypothetical scenario, but hey, it's just to illustrate the theory, okay? So let's picture today's world without humans around to keep things running. At first, nothing would really change. But slowly, little problems would start to snowball. Oil refineries and nuclear plants might keep going for a while until a jam here, a broken valve there, and suddenly disaster strikes with explosions, smoke, and fire tearing through the sky. Over time, pavement would split open, letting tiny green sprouts poke through. A few seasons later, those sprouts would grow into weeds, then bushes, and eventually trees strong enough to tear roads apart. At some point, our concrete jungles would turn into real green ones. And it wouldn't stop there. Bridges, buildings, entire skylines would crumble. Even the things we think will last forever, like plastic, would, over time, be swallowed by the Earth. Fast forward a few 100 million years, and Earth has completely resurfaced. Any direct evidence of our society would be long gone. Fossil evidence would fade away, and thanks to erosion and shifting tectonic plates, even our biggest cities would vanish in the blink of an eye, at least in geological terms. Now imagine Earth becomes home to a brand new intelligent civilization, and the scientists of this future species are trying to prove that we, humans, once existed. Let me tell you, they would have a ton of work ahead of them. That's because without any actual human-made objects left behind, they'd have to look for the geological fingerprints of our activities. In other words, features in rocks or minerals that tell scientists what happened on Earth long ago. They might check for unusual spikes of carbon, for example, but even then, the clues wouldn't be crystal clear, for reasons I will get to in a second. For now, my point is, it'd be just as hard for us to uncover traces of an ancient technological species. We wouldn't find any statues, no buildings, because nothing will be left standing after millions of years. Still, if they existed, they would have had the same basic needs as modern humans. They'd need to generate massive amounts of energy and grow tons of food. And that would have left behind similar geological fingerprints. Things like big spikes in atmospheric carbon, sudden climate shifts, rising sea levels. And if we ever found any of those traces, bingo! That could mean a pre-human intelligent civilization once existed. Sounds easy, right? Well, that's where the Silurian hypothesis comes in. Back in 2018, two scientists decided to put that idea to the test. Physicist Adam Frank and climate modeler Dr. Gavin Schmidt wanted to answer one big question. If an advanced civilization lived on Earth long ago, would we even be able to tell? And the answer is, well, probably not. Finding solid evidence for a civilization that old would be incredibly difficult, and there are two big reasons for that. First, because it's hard to tell when those geological fingerprints are human-made and when they're the result of natural forces. I mean, did the temperature rise during a certain period because of industries, or was it just a natural phenomenon? Here's an example. What's happening to our climate right now looks a lot like certain events in Earth's past called hyperthermals. One of those happened about 55 million years ago, when global temperatures shot up by around 14 degrees Fahrenheit. But hyperthermals usually happen during times of intense tectonic activity, when Earth's plates were shifting and volcanoes were going wild. So in that case, it was natural. But you get the point, right? Maybe there were other events like that in a much older era, that in a rare and unlikely scenario could have been caused by an ancient society. But it would be difficult to tell. There's a reason we might never find their traces. The longer an advanced civilization lasts, the more evidence it leaves behind. But here's the twist. To last that long, they would need to be sustainable. And the more sustainable a society is, the smaller the impact it leaves on the planet. Smaller impact means fewer clues for us to find. Can you see the paradox? The civilizations most likely to survive the longest are the ones that leave the least behind. For example, a society that runs mostly on wind and solar power wouldn't leave nearly as much evidence as one powered by fossil fuels. Okay, so we've got our answer. It would be really hard, if not impossible, to find any evidence that an ancient technological civilization lived here before us. But that doesn't mean they never existed. The truth is, we still don't have proper tools to look that far back into Earth's history in detail. So, maybe we should keep an open mind. up until now, you've probably pictured this ancient civilization as humanoids, right? You know, 2 legs, 2 arms, walking around like us. But some scientists like to play with a different idea. Maybe we're looking in the wrong place. What if they were sea creatures? I'm talking about cephalopods, ocean animals like octopuses, cuttlefish, and squid. These guys have complex nervous systems and surprisingly sophisticated behavior. They can change color and skin patterns in seconds, send signals like "I'm angry," and even hypnotize their prey. So what if they were the ancient civilization we've been talking about this whole time? Let's start with the light version of the theory. These species could have learned to live together in an organized way, and just like early humans, they might have changed their environment, maybe by farming underwater and hunting some species until they were gone. Maybe that could count as an early stage of a society. Even if that were the case, they never reached what we'd call an advanced stage of civilization. I mean, we don't see squids building spacecraft or octopuses working in IT. They never went through an industrial age or a space age. And if they're not a technological society, then they're not the answer to the Silurian hypothesis. So yeah, we're still left with nothing. And in the scientific community, this whole idea's even got a funny nickname: the most interesting hypothesis that's probably false. But here's the thing. Even if it's a long shot, it still gets scientists asking a big question. What will we humans leave behind millions of years from now? And the answers might actually help us figure out how to look for other advanced species beyond Earth, ones that could have disappeared a long time ago.
For centuries, humanity has believed in a linear path of evolution, a slow, steady climb from primitive survival to modern innovation. But what if that story is incomplete? What if the turning points in our development weren't purely natural? Roughly 6 million years ago, an ancestor of modern apes rose to its feet, setting in motion a journey that would eventually lead to Homo sapiens. For hundreds of thousands of years, progress was glacial. We tamed fire, carved basic tools, and lived hand-to-mouth existences. Then, just 20,000 years ago, everything changed. In a span shorter than a blink in evolutionary terms, we went from hunter-gatherers to architects of vast megalithic temples, builders of empires, and eventually, explorers of space. How do we make sense of that? Some argue we can't, not with conventional science alone. This explosion of intelligence and innovation has led to alternative theories. One of the most provocative, that we had help from beings far more advanced than ourselves. Welcome to the world of the Anunnaki. They're more than myth. They're the center of a sprawling theory that suggests humanity's greatest leaps weren't entirely human. According to ancient Sumerian texts, these so-called gods came not from the heavens in a spiritual sense, but from the sky in the most literal way imaginable, another planet. And they didn't just visit, they stayed, they ruled, and perhaps most importantly, they altered us. Long before Egypt erected its pyramids, or Stonehenge crowned the English countryside, the Sumerians were building cities, inventing writing, crafting legal codes, and mapping the stars with uncanny accuracy. Their civilization bloomed in Mesopotamia nearly 7,000 years ago, and it left behind cuneiform tablets that continue to baffle and inspire. These records tell of beings called the Anunnaki, translated as those who came from heaven to earth. They introduced tools, language, agriculture, and even mathematics. But the texts also hint at a darker truth. These beings didn't just uplift humanity, they enslaved it. Why? One word: gold. Ancient records describe massive gold mining operations that predated technological society. But here's the twist. To early humans, gold was worthless. It had no utility, no exchange value, no role in survival. Yet we dug for it with obsessive intensity. According to the Sumerians, the Anunnaki needed gold, not for jewelry, but for survival. Their home planet, Nibiru, was dying. Its atmosphere was decaying, and gold particles, when dispersed in the air, could reflect solar radiation and purify environmental conditions. Earth had gold, lots of it. And so, the Anunnaki came. At first, they did the labor themselves, but mining Earth's crust was exhausting. Frustrated and desperate, they considered a more efficient solution: genetic engineering. If they could merge their DNA with that of early humans, they could create a workforce suited to the task, strong, obedient, and intelligent. Enki, one of the Anunnaki leaders, took the lead. Early experiments were monstrous, deformed hybrids that echo legends of giants, cyclops, and mythic beastlists. Many were destroyed, others abandoned. But eventually, success came. Using one of their own as a surrogate, they implanted a fertilized egg, part Anunnaki, part hominin. The result was a child named Adamu. Sound familiar? To many, Adamu is the precursor to the biblical Adam. The parallels between religious creation stories and Sumerian myth are too sharp to ignore. Created in our image, from clay, the Sumerians were telling a story that would echo through ages, morphing into sacred texts and oral traditions around the globe. Adamu and his descendants became laborers, building a society under Anunnaki rule. But something strange happened. These hybrids didn't just follow. They learned, they questioned, they grew in number and complexity. Eventually, they became us. Here's where the timeline warps. Homo sapiens have existed for over 300,000 years. Yet for most of that time, we were indistinguishable from animals in both behavior and cognition. Then, seemingly overnight, we developed art, architecture, religion, governance, and science. No smooth curve, just a spike. How? Some point to climate shifts or population booms, but others look to Nibiru. Modern astronomers have observed gravitational anomalies beyond Neptune, suggesting the presence of a massive unseen planet. Dubbed Planet 9 or Planet X, it eerily mirrors the Sumerian Nibiru, which they claimed had an elliptical orbit that brought it near Earth every 3,600 years. The timing of historical jumps in human development? It aligned suspiciously well. According to legend, as Nibiru approached Earth, the Anunnaki would return. Some think they never left. Others believe they're watching, waiting. What did they look like? Relics suggest beings 3-4 meters tall, with elongated skulls and high foreheads, features mimicked by ancient civilizations who bound the skulls of their elite. They wore ornate robes, had light skin, and luminous eyes. Their leader was Anu. His sons, Enki and Enlil, managed Earth's operations. The Anunnaki might have left behind more than just myths, hidden knowledge, lost technology, even genetic markers that still echo within our DNA. The idea is unsettling, yet alluring, that our creators may return, that we are not the pinnacle, but the product. And here's another twist. Some researchers argue that humans don't even belong here. In the book, Humans Are Not from Earth, anomalies in our biology are explored. Why are we uniquely vulnerable to sunlight? Why do we suffer chronic back pain? Why are childbirths so difficult? Every other species fits perfectly into Earth's environment. We arguably do not. Could it be because we're hybrids? Part Earth, part something else. From gold mines to rocket ships, from caves to satellites, our species has always been driven by something deep and inexplicable. Maybe it's curiosity, maybe ambition, or maybe, just maybe, it's a buried memory of where we came from and who made us. So next time you look up at the night sky, remember, the answers to humanity's origin may not lie beneath our feet, but far above our heads. And the Anunnaki, their story isn't over. It may be just beginning.
There's a place on Earth that looks like it came straight out of the movie Dune. Massive platforms of stone and mud rise in the middle of a scorching desert. And somehow, people manage to survive in such a hostile environment.
Oh, really?
But, unlike the movie, this real city in Peru was abandoned over 3,000 years ago and has stayed hidden from us until now. Meet Peñeco. This lost city is located in the Huaura province, north of Lima. After 8 years of excavation and conservation work, some of its secrets have finally been brought to light. It may look eerie and lifeless now, but it wasn't always this way. Experts think this place used to be a busy trading center for ancient Peruvians. In fact, it was part of the oldest known civilization in the Americas, at least as far as we know. And no, they weren't the Mayas or the Aztecs. That's a common mistake. I'm talking about the Corral Supe civilization. This society existed more than 5,000 years ago. That's super old. To put that in perspective, while the Sumerians in Mesopotamia were reaching their peak, and the Egyptians were just starting to build things in Giza, the people in Corral were already building pyramids. Thanks to them, Peru is now seen as one of the 6 places where civilization first began. But unlike the objects we find from ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, you won't see Corral artifacts in museums, at least not fancy vases covered in mysterious letters, since they didn't know pottery or writing. What they did know was how to build big. They left behind mind-blowing architecture, such as stepped pyramids and huge sunken plazas, like massive open-air arenas big enough to hold hundreds of people. And it's not like they just had one pyramid here and a plaza there. No, as I said, they built big. So far, researchers have found as many as 30 major metropolitan centers across what we now call the Corral region or Peru's north-central coast. You can think of them as full-on cities, with residential areas, several plazas, and ceremonial temples. Their largest pyramid, known as Pirámide Mayor, stands nearly 100 feet tall, with a base covering an area the size of about 4 football fields. That's substantial.
Oh my God!
And building all that surely wasn't easy. It took planning, coordination, and specialists. That suggests that Corral must have had organized labor and strong leadership to pull it off. Despite creating these incredible constructions, Corral cities stayed hidden for thousands of years. And even when researchers first came across the area, it took decades for them to realize how important it really was. They already knew about the ruins back in the 1940s, but it wasn't until the 90s that the first major study of Corral was done. And there's a reason they were ignored for so long. The architecture was so advanced and the proportions so huge that people thought, nah, this has to be something modern. They couldn't have been more wrong, though. And in 2001, studies finally recognized that Corral was the oldest known civilization in the Americas. Archaeologists believe this society existed from around 3,000 to 1,800 years before the Common Era, and for 4,000 years they flourished in complete isolation. Chances are they never met another civilization at all. This may explain why they are considered such a peaceful society. Researchers haven't found any signs of conflict. No fortifications, no battle gear, no trace of fighting. Instead, they seem more focused on commerce and, well, pleasure. Looks like they love music. In one of the temples, for example, archaeologists found 32 flutes made from bird bones. I wonder what that sounded like. Anyway, the Corral lived along 3 rivers, the Fortaleza, the Patavilca, and the Supe. Just like the newly discovered city of Peñeco, this lost city was built on a natural terrace about 1,970 feet above sea level. And no, they didn't do that for the view, it was for security. Building higher up protected them from flooding, since the site sits parallel to the Supe River. Just recently, after 8 years of excavation, experts finally uncovered its beauty. Altogether, they found 18 structures, including temples, residential complexes, and a huge circular plaza. There are also ceremonial halls built on top of large step platforms, along with stairways, courtyards, and carefully designed walls. These structures serve both practical and symbolic purposes. I mean, this was their hotspot, the place where people came together for rituals. Inside one of the structures, researchers uncovered remarkable finds, like sculptures molded in raw clay that portray human figures, animals, and ceremonial objects. They also dug up stone tools, such as grinders, crushers, and hammers. And remember I said they like music, right? Well, the team also found patutus there. That's like an old-school trumpet made of giant shells brought from the Pacific Ocean. Now, if you look at the map, one thing stands out. Piñeco is farther inland than other corral cities we've discovered, and that's important. The city's location was completely strategic, and that's why it earned the nickname City of Social Integration. There's this theory that says Piñeco played a key role in trading hematite, a mineral used since ancient times to make red pigment. Back then, this was fancy stuff. Piñeco likely served as a hub linking the coastal and highland villages of Supe and Waura. Maybe they traded hematite for fish and shellfish from the coastal villagers. But now comes the big question. What happened to the people who lived there? Why was Piñeco completely abandoned after thousands of years? Well, that still remains a mystery. There are different theories about why the Corral Supe civilization disappeared and why their most important cities were left abandoned. One of them is the maritime hypothesis. It suggests that societies first developed along the coast, relying heavily on fishing, and only later moved inland. So, in that view, cities were abandoned as people shifted away from them. But that doesn't fit Piñeco, right? I mean, it's way too far inland to count as a seaside city. So it's hard to say what really happened. If you look at their main city, archaeologists haven't found any solid evidence of one big disaster. No massive earthquake, no huge flood, nothing like that. And the same goes with Piñeco. There's just no sign of a single event that suddenly wiped them out. The likely explanation is a shift in climate. A change in the weather could have caused long droughts that affected local farming. That would have forced people to abandon their cities, like what happened in northern Mesopotamia. Now, can we say that with absolute certainty? Honestly, no. It's much more likely that several distinct factors led to the decline of that society. They might have also faced some internal conflict, issues of leadership or organization, for example. But that's impossible to prove with archaeology alone. Either way, Piñeco is a huge discovery. It gives us new clues to better understand the crisis the Corral civilization faced before its collapse. But for now, many of their secrets are still waiting to be uncovered, and there's still so much for researchers to figure out about how this civilization was born and how it evolved over time. If you want to visit Piñeco, here's some good news. The site has recently been opened to the public. It's about a 4.5-hour drive from Lima, and you can get there either by a private vehicle or through tourist services. Yeah, it's not the easiest journey, but the breathtaking landscapes will make up for it. And if you don't have the time or the money to fly all the way to Peru, don't worry. If you know Spanish, you can explore a virtual museum dedicated to Corral. It features 10 thematic rooms designed to take you on a journey back to the origins of civilization. You'll find photos, videos, infographics. It's a whole immersive experience. Of course, it's not the same as standing on the site itself, but it still offers a fascinating glimpse into the world of the oldest known civilization in the Americas.
About 14,000 years ago, some super skilled builders from another planet landed on Earth. Their mission was to help build a massive stone complex with perfectly interlocking blocks. They used some advanced technology, centuries ahead of their time, and once the job was done, they disappeared without a trace. This is not a sci-fi plot, but one of the theories trying to explain the mystery of Puma Punku. Scientists don't officially accept it, but they still don't know for sure how, when, and who built this impressive construction. Puma Punku is part of the ancient city of Tiwanaku, near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. Tiwanaku is an important place in Inca traditions. They believed it to be the place where the world was created. Historians believe Puma Punku was built around 536 AD. The first Europeans discovered it in the middle of the 16th century. At the heart of Puma Punku, there is a huge, terraced platform filled with massive stone blocks, some as big as a school bus. The largest one weighs a jaw-dropping 131 tons. That's heavier than 20 elephants. Even the smaller rocks are as big as a couch. Archaeologists believe there were at least 5 big gateways, as well as several smaller ones that may have been part of a grand monument. The site is built using 2 types of stone, red sandstone, and andesite, which is one of the hardest rocks on Earth. The 8-shaped blocks of the construction fit together like puzzle pieces. They all look the same, as if they were mass-produced in a factory. But that should have been impossible for an ancient civilization. Even the smaller rocks are as big as a couch. These blocks were carved with precise holes and grooves to fit together. Builders made perfectly straight lines, cut identical angles, created smooth surfaces, and drilled holes. Some scientists believe they may have used advanced techniques, but there's no record of the tools they used. It took another 1,000 years before other civilizations could match this level of precision. One of the biggest mysteries is how these enormous stones were transported. Puma Punku sits high up in the mountains at 12,600 feet above sea level. So high that even trees don't grow there. The builders didn't have wheels, cranes, or modern machines. Yet somehow, they moved these heavy blocks miles from their original locations. Some scientists think they used llama skin ropes and ramps, but no one really knows for sure. The most commonly accepted version is that the Tiwanaku civilization, which thrived in the region between 500 and 1000 CE, built this impressive site. The complex was enormous and had many different areas. A western court, a large open area in the center, and an eastern court that was surrounded by walls. Long ago, it must have been incredibly beautiful, with polished metal plaques shimmering in the sunlight, brightly colored fabrics and ceramics decorating the buildings, and people in elaborate costumes walking through the plaza. But something doesn't add up here, as the Tiwanaku people never wrote down how they built Puma Punku. They would have probably left some clues if they had accomplished something like this. Plus, the Tiwanaku people didn't have the high-tech equipment needed to carve and move giant stone blocks with perfect precision. The architectural historians who first studied the place professionally concluded that a hammerstone couldn't have done such a fine job. They found no metal tools that were used in the construction process. That's why they suggested they might have used some unconventional tools the historians didn't even recognize as tools. There's a theory that these ancient builders might have had a way to soften stone to make it easy to carve before it hardened again. Or maybe they poured liquid stone into molds, just like we make concrete today. If it's true, this would mean an advanced civilization existed in South America long before we thought. Some researchers even think it had to do with the theory of Atlantis or other lost civilizations that may have had immense knowledge before a global catastrophe wiped them out. Local legends say that powerful deities used incredible powers to lift and shape the massive stone blocks. And some people believe Puma Punku was so advanced that the builders must have had help from visitors from outer space. The perfect cuts and massive stones look like something from modern construction. The supporters of this theory also say that some carvings at Tiwanaku show figures wearing helmet-like shapes, so they could be left by space travelers. Scientists from the University of California, Los Angeles, decided to officially debunk this theory. They created a digital model of Puma Punku using super precise measurements from historical records. Then, they used a 3D printer to make a miniature version of the site at 4% of its original size. Once the pieces were printed, the team sorted them by size, shape, and design, like a giant puzzle. They noticed that some blocks had special grooves for holding metal clamps, and others had ornamental carvings. When they finished their model, they realized one of the buildings had a very familiar design. It looked just like structures from two nearby sites. This was solid proof that Puma Punku was built by humans, not visitors from outer space. Over the centuries, people stole stones from Puma Punku and moved them around. This made things even more confusing for archaeologists. UCLA team created a digital archive, so researchers all over the world can now study the site without traveling to Bolivia. So maybe we'll hear about the new twists in this mystery soon. Another construction from the past that still impresses us with extreme precision is the Serapeum of Saqqara, a burial place built around 3,000 to 3,500 years ago. A French scientist accidentally discovered it in 1850. Inside the Serapeum, he found a long underground hallway. On both sides of the hallway, there were giant stone rooms, and inside those rooms, there were huge granite sarcophagi. These sarcophagi were not built for people, but for the sacred Apis bulls. These bulls were treated like royalty, as the people believed they were chosen by deities. The Egyptians believed these bulls were the incarnations of the deity Ptah and had magical powers to protect their kingdom. Some of the stone boxes inside the Serapeum weighed around 70 tons. They were made with perfectly straight angles and smooth surfaces. Scientists noted roller marks on the floor and found wooden winches with levers, which the Egyptians likely used to move the sarcophagi. Since the burial chambers were lower than the hallway floor, workers filled them with sand, rolled the sarcophagus into place, and then slowly removed the sand to lower it perfectly into position. A stone inscription found in the Serapeum said it took 28 days just to move one of these stone boxes. Even though these sarcophagi were meant for bulls, they were way bigger than needed. Pharaohs, who were the rulers of Egypt, were buried in tiny coffins. So it's really weird that these boxes were so enormous. Another question is why they used granite, which is so hard to carve, instead of limestone. Some people believe the stone boxes weren't just tombs. They might have been ancient energy generators. The Egyptians knew about fermentation. If someone placed food or meat inside a perfectly sealed granite box and let fermentation happen, pressure would build up inside. Granite contains quartz, a special crystal that creates electricity when squeezed. As pressure increased, the box's lid could pop open, releasing gas. Ancient drawings found in the Serapeum show stones stacked on top of the boxes, which might have been used to make the lids even heavier and help produce more electricity. Thousands of years later, when explorers opened these boxes, they only found bull bones, maybe because all the organic material had disappeared over time. Scientists still aren't sure if the massive stone boxes were actually ancient energy systems. So, the mystery lives on.
In December 2016, a bombshell revelation rocked the world of classified intelligence. WikiLeaks had released top-secret Pentagon documents exposing a hidden war between the US Air Force and unidentified flying objects. According to these explosive files, the center of this interstellar conflict was none other than Antarctica, Earth's most remote and enigmatic continent. During the summer of 2016, the US Missile Defense System detected an entire fleet of UFOs rising from the Southern Ocean and heading at high speed toward the Mexican coast. American fighter jets were immediately scrambled, but just as suddenly as they appeared, the mysterious objects vanished from radar, leaving behind only questions and ripples of fear in high-ranking circles. And this, insiders claimed, was only one of many such encounters in a long-running covert battle beneath the ice. The story spread like wildfire across forums, alternative news sites, and YouTube channels. Eyewitnesses reported that the surfacing UFOs created enormous waves, damaging ships in the area. Other reports spoke of alien bases discovered deep beneath Antarctic ice, with entire zones marked off-limits to the public. Some even claimed that Russian President Vladimir Putin was being briefed on secret skirmishes between US forces and non-human entities. The truth seemed ready to explode into public view. But how much of this is real? And did WikiLeaks actually publish such world-shattering documents? Since 2010, WikiLeaks has indeed released hundreds of thousands of files, diplomatic cables, military reports, and surveillance data. While some documents reference unusual aerial phenomena, none mention extraterrestrial conflict in Antarctica. The story's origin can be traced to a post on European Times, a dubious website known for spreading unverified claims. It cited anonymous Russian intelligence officers as the source. From there, the tale snowballed through conspiracy blogs that forged fake scans of supposed US documents. complete with seals, signatures, and official stamps. Yet under closer examination, these documents crumble. Fonts are inconsistent with military formatting. Signatures are copy-pasted from unrelated sources, and crucially, no corroborating evidence exists. Why did this theory stick? Despite its shaky foundation, the story refuses to die. Why? 1. Real secrecy in Antarctica. The continent is governed by strict international treaties. Military activity is restricted, creating a veil of mystery that invites speculation. 2. Historical myths. Tales of Nazi bases, ancient alien ruins, and lost civilizations buried under Antarctic ice have long fueled the imaginations of conspiracy theorists. 3. Real UFO sightings. The US military has confirmed encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena, such as the famous 2004 Tic Tac incident, adding legitimacy to UFO narratives. 4. The WikiLeaks halo. For many, anything associated with WikiLeaks automatically seems credible. That association lent weight to the fabricated documents. Antarctica's vast, silent expanse is a fertile ground for myth-making. From secret bases to wormholes, the continent has become a canvas for every kind of fantastical speculation. Even real locations like Lake Vostok, a subglacial lake Russian scientists spent decades drilling into, have been dragged into alien lore despite zero scientific evidence. Unusual military flights near Antarctica in 2016 and 2017, including Boeing RC-135 reconnaissance planes, added fuel to the fire. Officials cited training and climate research, but to believers, they were part of a hidden campaign against otherworldly threats. The tale of a secret UFO war exposed by WikiLeaks is thrilling, but ultimately, it doesn't hold up. There's no credible documentation, no trustworthy sources, and no confirmation from WikiLeaks itself. Like many conspiracy theories, this one blends fragments of truth with layers of fiction, creating a narrative too seductive to let go. But seductive isn't the same as true. Behind the allure lies a stark reality. No aliens, no Antarctic war, just another myth, thriving in the shadows of secrecy and our eternal hunger for the extraordinary. Still, as long as Antarctica stays silent, the legends will grow, because nothing feeds the imagination like a blank, frozen slate at the edge of the world.
They found the tomb of a royal doctor who lived over 4,000 years ago, a man who held pharaohs' lives in his hands. This man knew secrets that only deities and kings were allowed to hear. And yet, when they opened his tomb in 2024, there was no body, just vivid paintings, untouched by time, and cryptic symbols carved into stone. Who was he, and why was he buried with spells linked to a scorpion deity? The tomb was buried deep beneath the sands of Saqqara. The doctor's name was Tete Nebefu. He lived around 4,100 years ago, during one of Egypt's most mysterious turning points, right at the edge of glory and collapse. These were the final days of Egypt's Old Kingdom. The sun still glinted off freshly built pyramids, but the shadows were already creeping in. The pharaoh, Pepi II, had ruled longer than anyone before him, 90 years. But by the end of his reign, the country was cracking. The power was slipping, the regional leaders were rising, and the Nile floods grew unpredictable. In this shaky period, the mysterious doctor thrived. His tomb was discovered by a Swiss-French archaeological team in the shadows of old pyramids. The weirdest part was that when they uncovered his burial chamber, they found no body, no golden treasures either. Unfortunately, the tomb had been robbed long ago. But what remained was something even more fascinating: the words and images left on the walls. The paintings are still vibrant, bright colors that somehow survived all those years underground. The walls show jars, containers, strange abstract patterns, and geometric shapes. And then there are hieroglyphs, lines and lines of sacred script carved with precision, like someone had poured their soul into every curve. These inscriptions revealed who Tete Nebefu truly was. Turns out, he wasn't just any doctor. He was the conjurer of Serket. Now, Serket was the female deity of scorpions, sacred and terrifying. Egyptians believed she could stop venom, heal bites, and protect the living from toxic elements. The title, Conjurer of Serket, meant Tete Nebi Fu was a specialist in treating dangerous stings and bites. And if he got an entire tomb for himself, he may have been Egypt's top expert in those things, a man who healed with both medicine and magic. But that wasn't all. He also held the title Director of Medicinal Plants, a title seen only once before in all of ancient Egypt. That means he knew the healing power of herbs, roots, and oils like no one else. Now, you might wonder, what plants in a huge land of sand? But in reality, ancient Egyptians used herbal medicine that would hold up in some labs today. They created pills, ointments, and inhalers. Most often, they chose some active ingredient, a flavor to make it easier to take, and something to deliver it into the body. Sound familiar? And yeah, they didn't have many traditional plants, so some of these ingredients were bizarre by our standards, like using crocodile dung and acacia mixed with honey. They even had formulas for anti-wrinkle creams. And apparently, our mysterious healer was also chief dentist. This title is almost never seen in ancient records. Evidence of Egyptian dentists is incredibly rare. Turns out, our ancient genius didn't just fight stings and study plants. He was also trusted with teeth and jaws, which were actually a huge problem in ancient Egypt. These people may have built wonders, but their teeth paid the price. Ancient Egyptians constantly caught grains of sand in their mouths. They often ate grit-filled bread and raw vegetables, which wore down enamel and caused a horrible condition called attrition. This led to tons of problems, including tooth loss. They had to improvise back in the day. For example, crafting the world's oldest known toothpaste from crushed rock, mint, and pepper, which ironically only made things worse for the gums. Or a toothpaste from things like eggshells, pumice, and natron, a salty mineral used for cleaning. They were also inventing mouthwashes from celery, bran, and herbs to ease the problem. Some mummies were even found with crude metal braces and gold wires attaching missing teeth. Though we're not sure if these were for the living, or was it just a nice little addition added as an afterlife gift. So, Tete Nebi Fu specialized in all these fields. 3 rare titles for one man. Now, back in the day, he must have been admired as incredibly knowledgeable. In a world without modern science, he would have been like a sorcerer who knows how some leaf or bark could save a life. That's why archaeologists believe Tete Nebi Fu wasn't just any doctor. He was, most likely, the royal physician, the one who treated the pharaoh himself. We don't know for sure which king he served. Maybe it was Pepi II, and who knows, maybe that's why the guy lived so long. But if that was the case, Tete Nebi Fu may have lived through the final moments of the Old Kingdom, watching the Golden Age crumble from inside the palace walls. And then he was buried, the body was looted, or perhaps just lost to time. But the team says they're still studying the tomb, still uncovering the traces of this incredible man. Overall, ancient Egyptians were practicing medicine on a crazy advanced level. Some practices feel familiar even today. They had hospitals, specialists, surgeries, and many more things, even medical schools. Both men and women were allowed to be doctors. They healed with various methods and practiced surgery with actual tools, scalpels, forceps, even sutures. Some doctors treated only the eyes, others the teeth, the stomach, or even what they called the hidden diseases. They knew how to clean and dress wounds, could set broken bones using splints made of wood or reeds wrapped in linen, and even prevented infections. There were even proctologists. They also built the first prosthetics, like a wooden toe with leather straps that help people walk normally again. The oldest known prosthetic is 3,000 years old. Now, the most shocking part is how they actually even tried to remove tumors. A recent study looked at a 4,000 years old skull. It belonged to a man in his 30s. There were signs of past tumors, and around 3 of them, there were marks, surgical cuts made with a metal tool. That suggests someone attempted to remove or study them, maybe treatment, maybe an autopsy. There was another skull of a woman over 50 years old. It also showed similar signs, but with healed fractures from an earlier injury, which is amazing because her treatment might have actually been successful. Being a healer in this society meant something powerful. It meant being a priest, a scientist, and a magician all at once. To ancient Egyptians, medicine was a necessary art, and they treated it with as much reverence as they did their deities. That's because they believed that sickness could be both physical and spiritual. So a doctor could recite a spell while applying a salve, and a lot of their treatments worked. The reputation of doctors in ancient Egypt was so strong that leaders from other parts of the ancient world, like Persia, actually sought them out. Even Homer, the Greek poet, once said the Egyptians were the most skilled healers of all. Of course, their understanding of the human body wasn't perfect. For example, they thought the heart controlled thought and emotion. They also didn't know what the brain really did. But their approach, observe symptoms, diagnose, and treat, well, that's modern medicine. Sure, they prayed over the wound, but they also healed it, didn't they? Their most famous physician was Imhotep. That guy was a true polymath, an architect, priest, and a healer who became so revered he was later worshipped as a deity of medicine. Yep, a human who was so cool they turned him into a deity. He lived 2,000 years before Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine. And yet, some people joke we should drop the Hippocratic Oath altogether and swear an Imhotepic oath instead. These people weren't just laying the foundations of pyramids, they were laying the foundations of healthcare.
If someone finally invents time travel and you hop on a trip to the past, you won't recognize many of the things you know and love today. The Statue of Liberty and the Egyptian pyramids, some basic gadgets like the remote control and your laptop, and even the corn you have for lunch have all changed beyond recognition. When the pyramids were originally built in ancient Egypt and Giza, and other places, they didn't look sandy brown at all. All of them were covered with white limestone. If you had seen them under the hot African sun, you'd have to look away. That's how smooth and shiny they were. Builders used around 6 million tons of this material for the Great Pyramid of Giza alone. It's the largest one you can still see on your trip to Egypt. The local rules were quite a thrifty crowd, and they reused some of the casing stones for other construction projects. A massive earthquake in the 14th century has also loosened some of the stones, so you won't see a lot of limestone, but some of it is still there, on top of the Pyramid of Khafre in Giza. It looks like it has a second peak on top of the first. In ancient times, all pyramids used to have capstones called pyramidions, covered in a mix of gold and silver. Most of them have been lost over the centuries, but you can still see a few of them at museums. They show images of Egyptian deities. The pyramids were probably modeled after a sacred pointed stone, the benben. It represented the rays of the sun. Now, lifting heavy rocks wasn't so simple without the tech we have today. I guess you'll agree with me if you helped your friends move at least once, and they made you carry the couch. But those smart Egyptians of the past thought of that and chose the pyramid shape. It lets the weight distribute evenly throughout the whole thing. The Statue of Liberty has also had a major makeover since it was first unveiled in 1886. Believe it or not, it used to be a shiny brown color, just like a penny. 20 years later, it changed its color to green. It wasn't a fashion statement, but a chemical reaction. The statue is covered with hundreds of thin copper sheets. When copper reacts with air, it naturally forms a protective layer called verdigris. This layer protects what's under it from corrosion, and that's why statues and other things made of copper, brass, and bronze can last so long. When Lady Liberty first turned green, people in authority decided it would be a good idea to paint it all over. It was way before social media, so you couldn't just drop an angry comment under the post describing the idea. But they wrote about it in the local newspapers, and the public didn't love the idea. Then the Times interviewed a copper and bronze manufacturer, and he confirmed they shouldn't repaint it, because removing the protective layer would mean destroying the statue. Over the years, people have suggested painting Lady Liberty several times, but no one has ever done it. I don't know about you, but I can't imagine that lady in any other color, so I guess it's for the better. You love bananas as much as I do? Next time you enjoy a juicy soft one, remember you gotta thank selective breeding for that texture. The original wild bananas had many large, hard seeds and not so much delicious pulp. And hey, who doesn't like a sugary watermelon? It has a history of over 5,000 years, and it used to have bitter yellowish white flesh and was really tricky to open. Selective breeding saved the day again, and watermelons got way sweeter. Japanese scientists went further and invented the seedless version. Corn's grandmother is a Mexican grass called teosinte. The kernels in this grass were small and hard to get. Farmers from many thousands of years ago saved the seeds only of those plants that were larger or tastier, or with kernels that were easier to grind. Thanks, my friends, for giving us the corn that's edible and even delicious. And just imagine, wild avocados were so small that they could easily fit in the palm of your hand. The pit in them was so large you wouldn't find much edible material inside. They also had a much harder shell than the ones we're used to. You probably wouldn't get a lot of work done without your beloved computer today, but I can't tell you exactly whom to thank for this invention. The ABC from 1942 is one of the contendants for the title of the first computer. It's short for the Atanasoff Berry computer, named after its inventors at Iowa State University. The ABC weighed over 700 pounds. Yep, yours must be way lighter than that. That big boy consisted of around 300 vacuum tubes and had a rotating drum, a little bigger than a paint can, and had small capacitors on it. A capacitor is a gadget that can store an electric charge, like a battery. The ABC could solve problems with up to 29 different variables to help scientists save some time. Like modern computers, it used binary digits, ones and zeros, to represent all numbers and data. Because of that, it was possible to do the calculations electronically. And now, my favorite part, the ABC finished one operation about every 15 seconds. Just for you to compare, it's millions of operations per second now. Unlike the tech we use today, the ABC did not have a changeable stored program, so the program could only do a single task at a time. An operator had to write down the intermediate answer and then dial that back into the computer. Sounds like another reason to be happy we live in the 21st century. That remote control you use for all sorts of appliances has gone a long way too. Nikola Tesla, who gave us alternating current, designed one of the first wireless remote controls back in 1898. He named his invention teleautomation and demonstrated it on a miniature boat controlled by radio waves. The boat had a little metal antenna attached to it. Tesla sent signals to the boat using a box with a lever and a telegraph key, which was his version of a remote control. Those signals set electrical contacts on the boat into motion and moved the rudder and the propeller, and Tesla was controlling the boat. The concept of the remote control soon spread to other gadgets. The first television remote control followed in 1950. It was designed by the Zenith Radio Corporation called LazyBone. Don't take it personally, please. This LazyBone had a massive cable that was attached to the TV set, and those who tried it didn't fall in love with the invention because they tripped over that cord. I feel your pain, my friends. If you live or work on one of the top floors, you gotta love this one. Meet the first passenger elevator. It traveled at the speed of 40 feet per minute. Not the fastest, I know, compared to today's record, which is 40 feet per second. But hey, it was built back in 1857 in New York and was more of a tourist attraction than a necessity. The elevator had a steam engine hidden in the basement of a 5-story building. 3 years later, they shut it down because the public didn't appreciate it. Otis Tufts filed the first patent for a vertical railway around the same time. His invention included an actual car with a bench inside for people to sit on. Sounds like a great spot to hang out with friends to me. What do you say? Then they started adding elevators to luxurious hotels around the world. They were entire rooms with a rich design, upholstered seats and mirrors on the walls, and sometimes even a small chandelier. There was an obligatory operator who'd close the door and the car would start its super slow ascent. It was still more about style than about speed, so I guess I'd choose the stairs.
An ancient structure, the largest of its kind, is standing silent and ominous in the Egyptian desert. What if this pyramid, the Pyramid of Cheops, isn't just an ancient tomb? What if it's the colossal foundation of a long-lost technology far beyond our understanding, built as part of an ancient space elevator? A space elevator sounds like something out of a futuristic sci-fi movie. It's a massive cable anchored to Earth and going all the way up to the stars, allowing travel to and from space without rockets. What if someone managed to build it millennia before us? Let's start with the pyramid itself. The Pyramid of Cheops isn't just any pyramid. It's the heaviest and most precise of all the pyramids on our planet. Historians believe it's around 4,500 years old. But there's an opinion that it might be much, much older. Some claim that there's evidence supporting this theory, but it has been dismissed by Egyptologists. Probably because it doesn't fit the established story, or because the implications are too world-shaking. Now, look at the pyramid structure, at these huge blocks stacked with laser-like precision, aligned to true north, rising up in a sharp, stable form. Inside, there are only a few narrow, sloping corridors and a small number of rooms. The corridors don't even make sense for human movement. They're narrow, angular, probably designed to accommodate something else, something functional. The passages themselves look more like maintenance tunnels than ceremonial spaces. They don't even run horizontally, slanting inward and downward as if carrying some hidden purpose. There are also diagonal channels running from the edges toward the center, their purpose unknown. Lubrication channels or pressure tunnels. And then there's the main room, situated close to the pyramid's heart, but not right in the center. Why? Now look at this bizarre vertical shaft at the very top, piercing downward toward the center. Around the pyramid, there's rust, thousands of tons of it. What if it's the remnants of a technological complex? An ancient spaceport decayed into dust and debris millennia ago? Could the rooms have been technical chambers for maintaining the impossible? A cable that stretched all the way into space? Then the corridors and channels could have been used to stabilize, fasten, or even power this mysterious device. Historians insist these pyramids were tombs or ritual sites. At the same time, when archaeologists can't explain an ancient structure, they often default to religious use. The truth may be far more practical and shocking. The pyramid could have served as the base of an immense, stabilizing structure designed to extend a cable toward space. An ancient civilization could have built it to efficiently transport massive loads into orbit. A space elevator would have been efficient and economical and could have supported an advanced society's need for regular, dependable access to the sky. The pyramid's mass is beyond belief, and it might not be an accident. To anchor something like a space elevator, a structure would need to resist the pull of a cable stretching thousands of miles into orbit. It would need to balance centrifugal force with monumental gravity, and this colossal stone pyramid could have been that counterweight. And the pyramid's inner rooms, corridors, and channels might have served specific technical purposes. Next to the Pyramid of Cheops, there's the slightly smaller Pyramid of Khafra. It has similar diagonal corridors, similar central rooms, and the same purposeful alignment. Could it have been a version 1 space elevator? A prototype of the technology used in Cheops? Like old runways left abandoned at an airport, Khafra could be the first draft of something far grander. You might ask, why would anyone need such a colossal structure in the ancient past? Well, because the further you advance, the more you seek efficiency. A space elevator is the ultimate economical solution for transporting huge amounts of cargo to and from orbit. It's the dream of modern engineers, and maybe it was the achievement of an ancient society. We barely know who lived on Earth 10,000 years ago, let alone what technology they might have wielded. What if there was once a civilization advanced enough to build such an elevator? They may not have been human altogether. Maybe they were visitors. Perhaps they were Earth-based. We might never find the answers to this mystery.
There you are, trekking across a desert on foot. It's hot, you're terribly thirsty, and now you gotta walk around this stupid wall. Wait, a wall in the middle of a sandy, lifeless nowhere? Exactly, a wall in the northern Saudi desert. Archaeologists have just made a super exciting discovery, and what they found was not just a single wall. No, it was a whole ancient walled city that might date back to 2400 BCE. They think this place was home to around 500 people and could have been used for 1,000 years. This discovery is groundbreaking. It means that the area could have been way more advanced than anyone expected. This city was well organized, with different zones for living, towers and strong walls for protection, and different sections for all kinds of daily life. This ancient city, now called Al-Natta, was basically an oasis town. And it's great since it can give us a peek into what life might have been like in this desert thousands of years ago. Apparently, they had clearly separated areas, like residential sections, a cemetery, farmland, and even a town center. This oasis city, found in the Khaybar area, is the first big organized settlement from the 2nd or 3rd millennium BCE that researchers have uncovered in northwestern Arabia. The first surveys show that this town, which covered about 6 acres, had several districts, including the residential area, the cemetery, and the legal one, with courts. The houses were set up in neat rows, all connected by small roads. Those streets kept the residential area separate from the rest of the town. Back then, most people in this region were nomadic herders, always moving around. But archaeologists have been sure that during the Bronze Age, Northwest Arabia had small walled towns and oasis centers scattered across it. These connected oasis towns were unique, offering secure places for people to live, store goods, and trade. They started showing the beginnings of urban planning, which hints that people of that time were already starting to settle down and organize communities more seriously. The research team estimated that there were about 50 homes in Al-Natta, but that number could go up to 70 as they keep digging. They think that a few hundred people lived there, and probably one of the coolest things is that some houses went up to 3 stories tall. Built on a slope near a couple of major trade routes, this city was set up in a prime spot. Now, one of the most impressive things about this place is its water supply. The oasis had springs and aquifers, which are underground water sources, and such conditions were perfect for farming. Those water sources meant residents could grow their own food, making the town self-sufficient. The outer walls probably helped control who could enter the town and get access to its resources. This settled way of life was an impressive shift from nomadic living to a more agro-pastoral lifestyle, which means a mix of farming and herding animals. Another find that supports this theory is a bunch of tools, like grinding stones, mortars, and pestles, discovered inside the town. People there must have ground grains and prepared food. They had a diet of cereals, meat, and milk from animals they raised themselves. These astonishing findings show that the inhabitants of the town could easily feed themselves and were surprisingly advanced for that time. Thanks to better access to Saudi Arabia in the past couple of decades, archaeologists now have a much clearer picture of what life there was like thousands of years ago. The most exciting thing is that Al-Natta might have been part of a whole network of similar fortified oasis towns spread across the region, and all of these connected sites could show us how trade routes and small settlements worked together at that time in that arid area. Now, at the same time, this recent discovery isn't the only one that has the scientific world buzzing with excitement. How about we visit Egypt and see for ourselves? After all, archaeologists have just found a stash of ancient Egyptian and Greek treasure underwater. They were exploring the lost city of Thonis Heraklion off the coast of Egypt, which sank more than 1,000 years ago. This city was legendary, and nobody even knew where it was until it was rediscovered in 2000. Now they're uncovering more and more, and on this dive, they found a pile of gold and silver treasures. Those were probably used in rituals to bless Egyptian pharaohs when they took the throne. The researchers even found an ancient Greek temple dedicated to Aphrodite and some super-old Greek weapons. Frank Gaudio, the lead archaeologist, said it was astonishing that those delicate objects had survived the disaster that brought the city down. Back in its prime, Thonis Heraklion was one of the biggest port cities in the Mediterranean. It was a huge center of social life and was the main entry point for ships from Greece coming into Egypt. But tragically, due to rising waters, earthquakes, and a catastrophic tidal wave, the soil underneath the city literally turned into mush, and then the entire city sank into the Mediterranean. It was forgotten until Gaudio's team found it in 2000. Since then, they've been uncovering new parts of the city and piecing together its history little by little. If a lost underwater city doesn't seem impressive enough, we can travel to the Amazon. The discovery made there is truly mind-boggling. For centuries, people have talked about lost cities deep in the Amazon, like El Dorado, that mythical city of gold that lured Spanish explorers into the jungle. A lot of them never came back. Then, in the 1900s, a British explorer named Percy Fawcett went searching for what he called the lost city of Z, and he too disappeared. But now, finally, scientists have actually found proof that those lost cities in the Amazon were real all along. A team of scientists use a tech called LiDAR, which basically allows you to see through thick jungle from above by bouncing light beams off the ground. They flew over the jungle in Bolivia in a helicopter about 650 feet up and mapped out those hidden ancient cities. What they found were ruins of a huge urban settlement built by the Kasarabi people who lived there from 500 to 1400 CE. And it wasn't just a couple of buildings here and there. No, the LiDAR maps revealed massive urban centers, pyramids, platforms, roads, canals, and causeways, all carefully laid out. Turns out the Amazon wasn't just an untouched jungle. It was once home to big, complex cities. A scientist from the German Archaeological Institute explained that Europeans had long ignored the possibility of ancient Amazonian cities, but the LiDAR maps showed they were wrong. The new maps have revealed 26 sites, including 11 that no one even knew existed. Researchers have discovered two main city sites, Landivar and Kotoka. They had massive moat causeways stretching out like spokes on a wheel, linking the main cities with smaller surrounding settlements. Some of the canals even connected the cities to rivers and a big lake, which allowed water to flow through the area. Over the years, scientists found scattered ruins all over this region, but the thick jungle made it nearly impossible to connect the dots and see if or how they were related. With LiDAR, the whole layout came to life, showing that those sites were part of a much larger organized urban system. It's now also clear that the sites had a greater meaning, since everything is lined up in a way that could be symbolic of the spiritual beliefs of the inhabitants. The Kasarabi culture isn't as famous as the Maya, but they had a thriving society in an area that faced huge challenges, like yearly flooding. And although the nearby Andes had their own monumental sites, the Kasarabi were doing something absolutely unique. They even had reservoirs to store water, which suggests they might have been dealing with occasional droughts, which is pretty unusual for the Amazon. Actually, those terrible droughts could be why the Kasarabi eventually left their cities around 1400 CE. Humans invest a lot of time and money exploring the unknown. First outer space, then the ocean floor. But there's another frontier we're trying to conquer. Scientists call it the deep frontier. I'm talking about how far down to the Earth's core we've made it so far. During the 60s, humans tried digging the deepest man-made hole on Earth. This took us deep into the Arctic Circle. What later became known as the super deep borehole is also the deepest artificial point on Earth, reaching the depth of 40,230 feet. It took 20 years to drill this far into the Earth's crust, and researchers say this is only about 1/3 of the way through to the mantle. Here's a quick anatomy of our planet. If the Earth is like an onion, the crust is like the thick skin of this onion. This part is only 25 miles thick. Beyond this is the 1,800-mile deep mantle. And after that, right at the center of the Earth is the core, which is made up of two layers, inner and outer. Now, can you guess where on the planet the crust is at its thinnest? On the ocean floor. When American scientists understood that, they started drilling holes on the seabed. This gave way to Project Mohole. It began in 1961, but their technology to drill deep holes on the ocean was really bad. They had to improvise. They installed a system of propellers along the sides of their drill ship to keep it steady over the hole. The main challenge was to drill as vertically as possible. Otherwise, that deep hole would look more like a deep maze. Both the Kola Super Deep Borehole project and the Project Mohole came to an official stop in the years that followed. But hey, humans have built some pretty deep stuff underground. In 1963, a Turkish man took a swing with his sledgehammer to improve his basement and discovered a tunnel. That tunnel entrance led to more openings that connected a multitude of halls and chambers. He didn't know it, but he had discovered Deringoyu. This once lost city was up to 18 stories tall and 200 feet deep. The city was large enough to host 20,000 people, and it was simply standing beneath Cappadocia in Turkey the whole time. Cappadocia hosts hundreds of subterranean dwellings. 40 of these underground cities are at least 2 stories high, but none of them are as huge as Deringoyu. There's not a lot of historical accounts of how Deringoyu was born. Some speculate that the oldest part of the complex was dug about 2000 BCE by the Hittites. The Hittites were an Indo-European civilization who formed one of the first major civilizations of the Bronze Age in West Asia. Scholars think they built this underground city to protect themselves from invasion. Others think it was actually the Christians who built the city in the 1st century CE. They speculate that it could have been constructed to protect people from the intense temperature variations, extreme heat in summer and freezing cold in winter. Geographically, the terrain under Cappadocia is great for building. The rocks are soft, which makes tunneling easier. For that same reason, opening large caves underground is fragile. That's why most chambers have pillars that support them. On the bright side, and we are, none of the floors at Deringoyu have ever collapsed. The builders of Deringoyu thought of everything. The city was shut off from the world by huge rocks that hid its entrance. It was ventilated by a total of more than 15,000 shafts, around 10 centimeters wide. This way, they guaranteed enough breathing air in the upper levels in a way that they ended up being used as the living and sleeping quarters. The lower levels of this impressive maze were mainly used for storage. But honestly, they had it all. A room for a wine press, for domestic animals, small religious buildings. They certainly didn't spare any efforts to make that underground city as complete as an above-ground one. Now, speaking of impressive underground stuff, Switzerland has the longest tunnel in the world, built here on the Swiss Alps. This absurdly huge tunnel was built over 8,000 feet below the surface. Check this out. This is what the Gotthard Base Tunnel looks like. The first idea to build the tunnel was put forward as early as 1947, but construction only officially began in 1999. It took them years to approve the project and then scout for the perfect location. Even so, the 73 different rock types that compose Massif turned the construction into a real challenge. Some of the rocks were as hard as granite, and others were as soft as sandstone. This meant they needed different approaches and equipment so the whole thing wouldn't crumble down. Overall, they had to excavate about 28 million metric tons of rock to make way for the tunnel. There were many other challenges to build that far into the Earth. The deeper into the mountain they got, the hotter the temperatures were. Since there's no natural ventilation, temperatures would get as high as 115 degrees Fahrenheit, making it really hard for workers to endure. The tunnel stretches for 35 miles from one end to the other. During the construction, workers had to use 4 massive tunnel boring machines, aka moles, to penetrate through the massif. Each of these moles was around 1,400 feet long. But that was one of the best things they could do, since these machines limit the disturbance to the surrounding ground and help to produce a smooth tunnel wall. You'd never guess that the world's deepest basement belongs to the Sydney Opera House in Australia. The building goes as deep underground as it grows above ground. But this basement isn't just the Opera House's foundation, it's a parking lot. This unique parking garage penetrates 120 feet underground, or 12 stories deep, while most car parks are only 4 or 5 stories deep. But that's not all that makes it unique. You see, if they decided to build a normal rectangular parking space, this would end up eliminating a bunch of possible parking spaces. And since they wanted to maximize the space they had available, they had to come up with some superb structure. First, they opened up a man-made cavern to make that dream possible. Then they had to come up with a design. That's what led to the donut-shaped cavern, or what engineers call a double helix. This design shocked the engineering community for its innovative approach. But hey, it worked. Today, there is space for over 1,000 cars down there, which seems about right for an opera house. Let's wow once again real quick. Some underground structures may take up to an hour to reach. Take this gold mine in South Africa that lies around 2.5 miles below the surface. Yeah, you may think, hey, it's just a couple of miles, why does it take an hour to get there? But the conditions are hard and it's not for the weak. But Milan Ladina, an Ecuadorian runner, even completed a half marathon there, despite temperatures reaching 104 degrees Fahrenheit, high humidity at 80%, and an atmospheric pressure of 1.4, comparable to what divers experience 5 meters under the sea. Yikes!